Welcome back to the Brahmin Word, and today we are going to be diving into the life of a lady that I am extremely fascinated by in Scripture, and that is the woman of Esther. And just she is fascinating to me. Obviously, she did just incredible rescue mission in secret for a little bit. But not only that, but it raises a great question because we don't see the Lord by name mentioned very much in the book of Esther. And so that raises a couple questions. Why is that? And then does that mean that he's not working in the book of Esther? And I think both of those can be answered by looking at the life of Esther. And so we will be doing that by walking through the book of Esther. The first chapter of Esther really doesn't mention her because it's just set up, but let's turn there anyways and set up the background for the arrival of Esther. So turn to the book of Esther. We are going to be in chapter 1 today. I'm going to look at the whole first chapter of Esther. So, chapter 1, verse 1. Now, in the days of Ahasuerus, the Ahasuerus, who reigned from India to Ethiopia over 127 provinces, in those days, when King Ahasuerus sat on his royal throne in Susa, the citadel, in the third year of his reign, he gave a feast for all of his officials and servants. The army of Persia and Media, and the nobles and governors of the provinces were before him. So we will stop right there. So, uh, first off, we are definitely talking about an empire and not just a country because of the points of geography that we are given in verse 1. First, you are talking about the countries of India to Ethiopia. Now, do they have the same lines, country lines that we would see for India and Ethiopia today? Probably not. However, they were probably pretty close. Uh, but the big part that I see is the 127 provinces. So we know that King Ahasuerus is definitely not just a governor of one specific little region. No, he is over quite a bit. Um, and not only that, but it talks about the Medes and the Persians. So going back to Daniel, we know that this is during the time of after the exile from the people. Of the people of Israel to Babylon. We know it takes place after that, and it takes place during the time of the Medes and the Persian Empire. And so, with that, that gives us kind of the backdrop or the historical background uh, to the book of Esther. So he throws um, this wild feast, this big feast, and it was quite a feast. Let's pick up at verse 4. While he showed the riches of his royal glory and the splendor and pomp of his greatness for many days, 180 days. So you have the armies of the Mercians and the Persians and the Medes. There you go. The Persians and Medes. And then you have nobles and governors there with King Ahasuerus, and he's basically showing off to them, and it takes 180 days to do that. That is, again, we can't say for a complete 100% fact that the calendar at this time was the same 365-day calendar that you and I use today. However, if we take that estimation, this is a half a year of showing off. I mean, it is fascinating. Um, no, wait, 180. Yeah, 180 days. So 180. Yeah, so it's a half a year. I'm sorry, my math kind of went there, but it's a half a year of showing off to people within his kingdom, which, again, to you and I seems to be very silly. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But for an empire, for an emperor, or for somebody that is right below an emperor, it would make a lot of sense why they would show off and why it would take that long. But it's a very crazy feast. That's all that you really should know. Verse 5. And when these days were completed, so after the 180 days, the king gave for all the people present in Susa, the citadel, both great and small, a feast lasting for 7 days in the court of the garden of the king's palace. So you have a long 1 week feast. And again, for you and I, we are just trying to figure out, okay, how can I get through a graduation party for a few hours? This is a week long feast. I mean, it is massive. Uh, so you can imagine the amount of upkeep, the amount of money that's being poured into this feast. A lot is going on. Verse 6. There were white cotton curtains and violet hangings fastened with cords of fine linen and purple to silver rods, and marble pillars, and also couches of gold and silver on a mosaic pavement of porphyry, marble, mother of pearl, and precious stones. So again, just showing off the amount of wealth and status that King Ahasuerus has. Verse 7. Drinks were served in golden vessels, vessels of different kinds, and the royal wine was lavished according to the bounty of the king. And drinking was according to this edict. There is no compulsion. Not a great idea. Definitely gets to the point where you go from, okay, drinking is okay if you know that you can watch your how much you drink and have self-control to stop. Here there is no self-control. There is no limit. So for the king had given orders to all the staff of his palace to do as each man desired, and that is a very dangerous precedent. And well, Queen Vashti is about to find that out herself. So, verse 9. Queen Vashti also gave a feast for the women in the palace that belonged to King Ahasuerus. So, it's not just for these nobles and governors, but it's for the staff of the palace as well. Uh, but then the queen is brought with a request, and it's interesting what that request is, and not in a good way either. So, verse 10. On the seventh day, so it's after all this week of feasting, when the heart of the king was merry with wine, he was drunk. He commanded Mehuman, Biztha, Harbona, Bicta, and Abacta, Zetar, and Carcass, the 7 eunuchs who served in the presence of King Ahasuerus, to bring Queen Vashti before the king with her royal crown, in order to show the peoples and the princes her beauty, for she was lovely to look at. But Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command, delivered by the eunuchs. At this, the king became enraged, and his anger burned within him. So you have Vashti given this request to just come before the feast at the end of feasting with all of this drinking, and she is to be before him with a royal crown. That can also be translated as headdress. Now, here is the thought, especially with the next phrase, in order to show the peoples and the princess her beauty. Now, could that be um, with her being completely clothed? Absolutely, very, very possible. However, the following and the ending phrase of verse 11, for she was lovely to look at, that hints to me that it's something much darker, whether it is that she is completely nude without the headdress, or she is partially nude, is probably referencing to something sexual in nature, which is obviously not good. And so, therefore, Queen Vashti refused to come at the king's command. Couple of reasons here. If it is a sexual in nature, she does not want to do that. good for her. Another thing too, she realized how much these men have been drinking, how much the king has been drinking. It has been 7 days that they have been drinking. They are definitely not in their right mind. Anything could happen. It makes a lot of sense why she does not want to do that. However, the king, who is in charge, gets angry at this. Verse 13. Then the king said to the wise men who knew the times, for this was the king's procedure towards all who were versed in law and judgment, the men next to him being Karshina, Shithar, Admatha, Tarshish, Meres, Marcina, and Memucan, the 7 princes of Persia and Media, who saw the king's face and sat first in the kingdom. According to the law, what is to be done to Queen Vashti, because she has not performed the command of King Ahasuerus delivered by the eunuchs? Then Memucan said in the presence of the king and the officials, not only against the king has Queen Vashti done wrong, but also against all the officials and all the peoples who are in all the provinces of King Ahasuerus. For the queen's behavior will be made known to all women, causing them to look at their husbands with contempt, since they will say, King Ahasuerus commanded Queen Vashti to be brought before him, and she did not come. This very day, the noble women of Persia and Media, who have heard of the queen's behavior, will say the same to all the king's officials, and there will be contempt and wrath in plenty. If it please the king, let a royal order go out from him, and let it be written among the laws of the Persians and the Medes, that it may not be repealed, that Vashti is never again to come before King Ahasuerus, and let the king give her royal position to another who is better than she. So when the decree made by the king is proclaimed throughout all his kingdom, for it is vast, all women will give honor to their husbands, high and low alike. This advice pleased the king and the princes, and the king did as Memucan proposed. He sent letters to all the royal provinces, to every province in its own script, and to every people in its own language, that every man be master in his own household, and speak according to the language of his people. So, you have Vashti refusing this command. And again, could it be sexual in nature? Absolutely. Could it be not just presenting herself but dancing as well? Absolutely. Does she have every? Does she make a very good decision to not do that? Absolutely. However, again, you have to realize this is not a godly king. This is a pagan king the Persians and the Medes. He is making an awful decision, a horrifying decision, but yet he has made this decision. And these, let's just call them helpers of the king, these princes of Persia and Media. They see this opportunity to write this law, which we talked about with Daniel and the Lion's Den. Once a law is written in Persian and Median law, it is finalized. There is the only thing that can be there is really nothing that can be done once a law has been put into place. So, with that being said, this is very, very serious when they're writing this. They do not want women to become just throwing their husbands to the side just whenever they want. Which again, in a ancient Near Eastern culture, which is a very patriarchal culture, this is very, very common. Again, doesn't mean it's right. It is very, very wrong, but it is that is the culture that the that Esther was written in, not just written into, but that she lived in. Esther is written probably by Mordecai, as we will talk about in chapter 2. Uh, but with that being said, this is very patriarchal culture. It makes sense that the king has done this, that he's been advised to do this based on the culture of that day. Again, it doesn't make it right. It just shows that this is very, very common, in that they want their wives to respect everything that their husbands ask to do. Sadly, even if that means that they're asking them to do something that is that is a sin in itself. So with that, that gives you the backdrop to how powerful a moment it is where Esther comes into the presence of the king when she is not called upon and asks for the dinners that then result in the rescue of the Jews. Why is that such a powerful moment? It's because of the incident and the situation that happens with Queen Vashti. So even though you and I may look at this and just cringe and just be just appalled by this decree by the king, without that decree then sets up the rescue of the Jewish people, because Haman, if Haman went forward with his plan under Queen Vashti, most likely she would not have stood up for the Jews, of course, like Esther does. So with that, everything that goes with the life of Esther all has to do with God putting certain people in a specific place and time for His purpose. And He puts Ahasuerus and Vashti together for a time to set up Ahasuerus and Esther for the rescue of the Jewish people within the Medes and the Persian Empire. So, with that being said, thanks for spending a little bit of time here with me today as we walk through this first chapter of the life of Esther, even though she hasn't quite been introduced yet. It's setting the stage, but thank you for spending a little bit of time with me today as we set up the life of Esther. Thanks.